I think that we're live.
Yeah, okay.
Look natural. All right, and so there's a comment section on the right side.
Cool.
And you can see comments when they come in, and you can read them, or I can read them, or whatever. We'll take them as they come. And
Cool.
so when you log on, oh, nobody's up here yet. It takes a couple minutes for Facebook to show up.
Yeah.
So when they come on, they'll say hi.
Cool.
Let's see. I don't see anybody yet. The algorithms have been like a little. Oh, here are some people. Okay, now it's showing it. See 2 people up here. There we go. Yeah, the Facebook algorithms have been a little bit of a hot mess lately with showing things up, and so it takes a little bit longer than usual. So we got about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's see. Are you doing any tours?
This is kind of my tour just because Delta is back up and running. I'm going to be going, so I will be in, I will be at, what is it? I will be in Delaware in October. I will be in Connecticut in October. In November, I'll be in Chicago. And,
well, you're right in DC, so maybe we can have you down here on Virginia Beach.
Why not? Yeah, hopefully, I would love to. Because like I did an event at the Tidewater. Hi there. Hi there.
I was just talking about you. I think that's Kristen.
Yeah, hi, Kristen.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did that event with the Tidewater Autism Society.
Yeah, and it was great. I would love to come down to Virginia Beach. I've never been, but I have a friend who's in the Navy who is, I think, stationed down there. So I know the place, and I would love to visit if possible.
I'm going to get in touch with your publicist, and make that happen, because we have a huge community down here.
Yeah. Hello, Omari.
Omari's down here too in Virginia Beach, I think.
All right.
Hey, Omari.
How you doing, Omari?
All right, so I'm going to take my ticker off.
Cool.
Okay, cool. And people will log on and they'll say hi when they get on. Hi. And if you want your name, your face to show up, you have to click a link at the top of the post and grant your permission, since we're in a private group.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So welcome, everyone, book clubbers. I am your host, Megan, and I'm here with Eric Garcia, who wrote the fabulous new book, We Are Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation. Finally. Let's change it. Yes. So, Eric, you are a senior Washington correspondent for The Independent. So I don't even know what that means. You're a journalist.
So yeah. Long story short, The Independent is a newspaper in the UK, and basically I'm their main guy in Washington. So I have somebody below me, but mostly I'd like for him to do stuff with me, but for the most part, I'm the senior guy. I handle the biggest stuff. So yeah,
that's really cool. So you get to basically talk to everyone. You have the press.
Yeah, I was talking to AOC earlier this week, and I was talking with, and then I was a few weeks ago. I was talking with Jim Jordan. So I'm working on getting my White House press pass, but mostly I cover Congress these days. So
that's awesome. Gosh, you have a cool job.
Yeah.
And so you also, you write lots of articles for different places. You just had an article in the Times, yesterday?
Yeah, in Time Magazine.
Yeah.
So.
That was pretty awesome. If you haven't checked it out, Angelina and Kimberly, who are my admins, will be posting the link to the article in Time Magazine. That's big time.
Yeah, no, it was I mentioned it on Twitter. I tweeted about this. It was like, my dad is very Republican. so he didn't trust the New York Times. He didn't trust the, growing up in Southern California, he didn't trust the LA Times, but he trusted Time Magazine. Time Magazine was like in his office, like, 'cause he worked from home for a lot. Like, he worked at home for a long time. And like Time Magazine was in his office. And like, that was like, to me, that was seen as like a serious magazine. So like, to be in Time Magazine was really kind of full circle, because it was like Time Magazine. The only things that he would watch, that he would consume, that were not like conservative media, were Time Magazine and Meet the Press. So
he would watch Meet the Press.
you'd watch Meet the Press, yeah, when Tim Russell was the host. Yeah,
Interesting. I know it's funny with the politics. Everybody has their own things that they trust, so you do have to infiltrate those, don't we?
Yeah, my dad is basically almost exclusively conservative media these days. But like, I think that like when he saw that I was in Time Magazine, that showed like, okay, yeah, like you're doing a legitimate, you're like a legitimate journalist. But like,
oh my gosh,
we still love each other, and like I think, and he's a really important. Like, I would not care about politics if it wasn't for my dad and watching Fox News every night with my dad growing up. So
okay. So before we talk about the book, I want to kind of get into your life story growing up.
Yeah.
Tell us all about those things.
Yeah, it's it's always fascinating to me when autistic people talk about their childhood or growing up, because as my friend M. Remy Yergo, whose book Authoring Autism everybody should read, it's really academic. You guys should have them on this show.
What's it called?
Authoring Autism, M. Remy Yergo. They are non-binary, but they're a professor at the University of Michigan. They mention how autism is largely a rhetorical condition, which is to say that it's mostly we know what we know about autism through rhetoric and like stories that our parents say, like, oh, they weren't responsive when we called their name, or stories about them just being overwhelmed by the senses, by senses, or things like that. So we don't really know. I think all I can really say is that, like, I don't know what it was like, what it would have been like to be anything else, because I was born this way.
Right.
But you do know that you do know that you stand out, and you know that you're weird for whatever reason you are.
You feel it.
Yeah, you feel it, because autism, like every other disability, it's society that disables you as much as the actual disability. That's not to say that there aren't impairments, but it's the ostracization or the systemic,
the othering.
The systemic othering of disabled people that really disables them. So there's a difference between impairments and disability, and you don't know, like, and the thing that I was saying earlier this week when I was talking with a friend of mine is, I was like, doctors aren't the only people who give diagnostic labels. Kids on the playground do too,
Yeah.
And when you get that in that label, it's like I was saying that like one thing I'll always remember when I was in special education in 4th grade. I remember I would sometimes get taken out to do classes at home, my homework in what was called RSP. I do not remember what RSP stands for. What I do remember is one kid on the playground says it stands for really stupid people. And that I will remember that to my grave. And I think so. I think that is one thing, but like I think that the first time, and like I knew about this condition called Asperger's, but like it wasn't until one time, incidentally, when I was in Washington D.C., like when everybody takes their field trip to Washington D.C. when you're in middle school. Staying with one of my roommates at the hotel said, like, he said that, like, oh, I know this kid, he's really weird, but he knows everything. And then his aunt, I guess, was like a clinician or something like that. He says, oh, he has Asperger's. And I'd heard that term before, but then like they explained it. And then like, it wasn't until I was 17, I guess it was in April. I must have been 17, 18. No, I must have been, it's 2007. So yeah, I was 16. CNN, it was for April. It was for Autism Awareness Month. They played, had Sanjay Gupta, who is now really a big deal because of coronavirus. But but he interviewed the late Mel Baggs, who I'm sure everybody knows. God rest their soul. Um, and I remember being totally entranced with them because even though Mel didn't speak, so much of what they did reminded me of myself. And then I remember it was that same year, this episode probably happened right after that. Larry King was on and it had an interview with Jenny McCarthy talking about vaccines. And right then and there goes that kind of is that's perfectly indicative of what responsible media portrayal could be and what irresponsible media portrayal could be. Because here you had Sanjay Gupta, who's a doctor, who's a medical correspondent, who knows what he's talking about in public health, having this really humane moment with an autistic person, a non-speaking autistic person, and treating them like a human being.
Right.
And
this is back in 2007?
This is in 2007. So this is like right when Autism Speaks was really getting big. This
rare.
Is but I think that it was because, and it's even, and even the fact that he's a doctor, that's really weird because like a lot of doctors are great, but a lot of doctors pathologize autistic people or don't treat them as
model, yeah.
Right. But like this was, it was very Oliver Sacks in a way, like, treating the person as a human being. And then like right after that, or like in the same breath, on the same network, you have Larry King, who like I watched every night because like Larry King was a staple in Americana, having Jenny McCarthy on and talking about vaccines. And I remember asking my mom afterward, I was like, hey mom, did you guys notice my symptoms after I got vaccinated? And my mom was just like, what are you talking about? It wasn't like she was like, oh, that's not true. She was more like just what?
Right.
Like, because I got diagnosed around they first started knowing that there was like some kind of disability in like 94, and I finally got the label around 97, 98. So like, and Andrew Wakefield's study came out in like 98, and it takes a while for these things to enter pop culture and zeitgeist or whatever. So like, it wasn't so much that she swatted it down. It was just that she's like, what are you talking about? And like I say, like, thank God that I didn't get diagnosed then, because then could have been very.
Because your mom might have had you might have had a totally different upbringing.
Because before Google, and like I interviewed in the book, as you guys know, I interviewed Aaron Starr, and their mom had was an anti-vaxxer. Some people who didn't make it into the final draft of the book, like their parents were anti-vaxxers or like bought into it hook, line, and sinker, and it was very easy to do that. And I think that was the moment, and this is the time when I was starting to get into journalism, and I thought that like maybe journalism could be something for me. And like in hindsight, I look back at that and I think, oh, this is that is the power of media, that you could have this really that
you shape minds,
people's perceptions. Because like I think a lot of times we as journalists, because a lot of people think that I'm an advocate. I'm not an advocate. I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist who writes about autism, and I'm very adamant about that. But like I think that like a lot of times journalists, we say, oh well, we're just covering the news, and I get that. I don't think our job is to take a side, but I think that who you choose to platform and who you choose to give to amplify their voice, and who you choose to interview, and what stories you choose does have a precipitous effect, and as journalists we do need to kind of own up to our responsibility in this role and say that like, yeah, we do kind of percept and shape minds. We're not just I think it's like like we report, you decide, or like C-SPAN, their C-SPAN slogan is make up your own mind. But like, and yeah, C-SPAN does it unfiltered, but C-SPAN doesn't show every event of public figures. So like, I think that to me really showed in hindsight the power of media. Hello over down in Cape Town. I remember I knew I took a class on African music, and I learned like that you had to click when you say Xhosa. But yeah, so like that's That to me is like
Yeah.
the most important part of my youth. So
You're not just reporting the news, you're shaping the news with who you have on, what questions you're asking. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think, I think about that a lot. So like, that's not a way to answer your question because I didn't talk about what it was like growing up. I think that's much more important. I think that's a better way of understanding growing up as autistic is how the world perceives you, and then in turn how you perceive yourself.
So you were what age when the Autism Speaks commercials came out?
I must have been 15, 16. Yeah, because like I talk about that public service announcement in my book about like a bunch of heavy, like I grew up loving heavy metal music. I grew up in Southern California, playing in garage bands, the whole 9 yards that everybody does. And like I remember that ad with like a bunch of heavy metal musicians and rock and roll musicians like Roger Daltrey and Gene Simmons, and them talking about like, it's more than type 1, type 2 diabetes and cystic fibrosis and childhood cancer combined. And it's like it's the fastest growing developmental disability in the United States. And like it's like
yeah.
And then at the end, it's like Ronnie James Dio, who I'm a big fan of. I love Ronnie James Dio, and I love Black. I think that era of Black Sabbath is better than the Ozzy Osbourne era of Black Sabbath. But like, fight me. But like that was, that in hindsight, like I think about it, like when I was young, I was like, oh, they know who I am. But then but like when I think about it now, it's like, oh wow, they wanted to kind of fix me and change me.
Yes.
And that has a really profound impact on how you see yourself, because media shapes as much as once again, because I say this because I work in media. I think we forget how much media shapes people's perceptions outside of media. And it probably did. It's like, okay, I need to be fixed, and these people are going to try to help fix me, instead of we see you and we accept you, so like that was that. So yeah, like I was like in my teen years when autism kind of went from being this thing that was discussed at clinics and went from being this thing that was discussed at research seminars to this thing that became kind of this cause du jour for elites. Like if you remember like 2005, like there was like every kind of fundraiser for Autism Speaks or for Autism Society of America, or like any kind of like there were like.
Well, and you talked about there was that whole like thing in Congress. It was like the Cure something.
The Combating Autism Act.
Yeah, that one. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was signed by President Bush, and it was passed on a bipartisan basis. Senator Chris Dodd, a Democrat from Connecticut, and Senator Rick Santorum, a Republican, of course, co-sponsored it. And like when I talked with Chris Dodd a few years ago, and like he said, I said, I'm autistic, and I remember when you passed that legislation. He's like, yeah, I did it with Rick Santorum, and it was seen as like this was a thing that like Democrats and Republicans can work together for the common. Yeah, work together. And of course, like in many ways, it was like President Bush, of course, his father passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this was seen as like another thing where like they could do some good, and like so like it was becoming this big thing everybody was talking about, and that elites were putting their money behind and putting their resources.
Hold on. I don't have the quote with me, but it brings me to this thing that you said in your book, that the politicians, it's not that they didn't do it out of malice, but
no, not at all.
They're only as good as the information they're getting.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
When they're getting information from the media that's doing, like the tragedy narrative, and they're getting it from parents who are also in the tragedy narrative, then they think it's a tragedy.
Yeah, like I mean, it's like one of the things I was looking at. I was going through a hearing with Senator Tom Harkin, and Tom Harkin is one of the best senators in the history of disability rights. He's the co-author of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and he was asking, like in 2009, he was prodding Thomas Insel, who was the head of the, I think, one of the NIHs,
NIMH or something.
Yeah, so something like that, NIMH or something like that. I think, and then like I was just thinking to myself, wow, because like that was the kind of the light bulb moment for me, because it was like, okay, I know, because like Dan Burton, who was the person who brought Andrew Wakefield to testify before Congress, he was a crank. He was the guy who thought that Vincent Foster killed himself and that Bill Clinton didn't kill himself and that Bill Clinton killed him. Like, he was a conspiracy theorist. Tom Harkin knew his stuff and was considered an ally of the disability community, but he could. So even he was using that narrative. And then I interviewed him later and he said, look, at the time that was what I thought, but now I kind of disagree, and he's changed, because the information has changed. And Barack Obama and John McCain and Hillary Clinton, all when they ran for president, talked about vaccines. And say what you will about all of them, but having interned for Barack Obama, knowing a lot of people who work for John McCain, having interviewed John McCain, having a lot of, growing up in a military, like with people who served in the military who admired John McCain, and knowing a lot of people who worked for Hillary Clinton, I know that they were not malicious. That was just what was being circulated at the time.
Yeah.
And you have to think that we waste it. And then on one end, I think about it on one end, it's like, wow, we have a lot of bad policy. On the other end, it's like, wow, we wasted a lot of time that could have been spent. A lot of time, a lot of money. Yeah, a lot of money too.
And it's still happening. Like right now, it's like billions of dollars going into things that you could be spending on.
Yeah, like it's even good. I'm sure I don't know how much you know, but it's going on in the United Kingdom now. Yeah. There's the Spectrum 10K, where I think that I don't know enough about it to speak, but I think they're sampling DNA or something like.
Yeah, I've been reading about it. I don't know enough to speak on it. I know people in here do, but I mean.
But my friends in the United Kingdom, because I've become friendly with Sarah Gibbs over in the United Kingdom and Joanne Lindbergh, who you guys should have on when their books hit the stateside. You should, because right now I don't think they're available in the United States. But when those books come out stateside, you should have both of them on.
What are their books called?
Drama Queen is Sarah Gibbs's, and Letters to My Weird Sisters is Joanne Lindbergh's.
We just put those on our recommendation list.
Yes, and they're fantastic. I'm listening to Sarah's on audio, and she's just a delight. But you're still seeing these things, and even though now we don't talk about cure, Autism Speaks doesn't use cure in its mission statement anymore. We're still funding a lot, or we're still pouring a lot of money into research about biology and risk factors.
I mean, almost all of it is going into that.
Yeah, only 6 or 7%. I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but 6 or 7% only goes to lifespan issues. When autistic people spend a lot more time alive than in the womb,
Big facts.
Yeah,
and that's true. They can't find care elsewhere, and it's kind of pigeonholed into that. Some parents are pigeonholed into that. Yeah. And then we should also talk about the fact that the only treatment in town, the only game in town that a lot of insurers will cover is ABA. So it's not just that the question of ABA, but it's that's the only kind of therapy that insurers feel confident covering. Even though the Pentagon's TRICARE, I'm sure you know this, yes.
they put out a whole report that people are trying to push back on. The Pentagon does a lot of because the Pentagon, the reason why it matters is because the Pentagon is one of the biggest employers of people in the federal government, and they have research saying this doesn't work.
They're efficiency experts.
Yeah, the Pentagon, say what you will about the military. They get, I have a lot of, like I said, I have military in my family, and I have a lot of friends in my friends who are military. The Pentagon doesn't screw around with being inefficient. So
they're inefficient when they want to be.
They're inefficient when they want to be, but not with so that, since that's the only game in town, that again changes people's perspective. So.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about your book. And those of you who are watching, if you have a question for Eric, we see the comments and we're highlighting them. If you have a question, you can ask. You know how these books work. Let's talk about your book.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
This is so refreshing. This book is so refreshing. Full disclosure, I've not read all of it. I'm a very slow reader. I'm
a slow reader too. It takes me as long to read a book as it does to write one.
Yeah. But it's fantastic. It's phenomenal. And it's so refreshing. It's a different type of book. It kind of has a Neurotribes vibe, but way easier to read.
Yeah.
You have a lot of you obviously know a lot of things because you're a journalist and you deal with facts and events and things like that. So you do have a lot of that in there, but it's very accessible to read. So
Yeah, like I mean, I've heard some people say that it's dry, and I can understand that, but like but like also like one thing I wanted to do is that like so the way that I see it is I go home to California when there's not a pandemic at least twice a year. And I usually that's the only time, like, because you're in the air, you can't look at your phone or things like that. Like, that's one of the few times I actually spend time reading. So like I wanted it to be a plain read, like something you could read on a coast to coast flight.
Awesome. You are
So
my type of writer.
yeah, so like I wanted it to be something that you could just read on a plane,
Yeah.
and it would be something that even the most basic person, it goes back to my training as a journalist, which is that like you have to write it in a way that people understand, and I wanted it to be that way because the majority of my career has been working in newspapers, so I wanted to have that kind of same spirit of like, can people understand this?
Yeah. I think I told you this before. My mom always had a policy at her work: never publish anything, even a memo, above a 5th grade reading level.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to make it so everybody can read it.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I mean, I think that it was. I think that was a very, very important thing for me, was to ensure that it was that people could understand it, and like I thank God for my training as a journalist, because that really taught me how to do that.
So what made you want to write this book, and what do you hope comes out of it?
Good questions. Both good questions. So it's kind of a long story.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in 2015. I was at a party by a guy by the name of Tim Mack, who now works for NPR. But at the time, he was working for the Daily Beast. I went to a party at his house, and he offered me a drink. And I said, "Oh, I don't drink because I can't drink because I'm on the autism spectrum, and the medicine I take doesn't mix." And I was just like, and later I developed a drinking problem. Then I got sober. But like but but what was funny about it is that Tim didn't say, "Oh, don't be a loser, like, have a drink with me," or something like that. He said, "Oh, there's a lot of autistic people in Washington who work in the Pentagon, who work on Capitol Hill, who are journalists. Like, you should write something about that." And I was 25 at the time, so I thought, okay, when I get better as a journalist, I was new to DC. I was 24 at the time. So
yeah,
like,
you were a baby.
Yeah, I was a kid. So like, I thought, so like, and then he got on my case and told me to write about it again one time, when I saw him again. And then like what happened was I was at National Journal, and then I was an economic policy reporter. And that was what I wanted to do, like, since I started journalism, was write about policy and politics. And, I was chasing around Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. So like, that was like, back when like Bernie Sanders was nobody, you could catch him in the hallway, like, of the Senate, and like,
he probably give you an earful.
Yeah, he would give me an earful, like, of the millionaires and the billionaires in this country, and the top 1% of the top 1%. I've talked to him so many times that I know like what he's going to say, but like I was really happy doing that. And then what happened was National Journal's print magazine decided to shut down. David Bradley, the owner of National Journal, decided to shut down the print magazine, and basically a lot of people I respected were leaving the magazine. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And then the editor at the magazine, a lovely human being by the name of Richard Just, he said, "I want to have," basically, he's like, "pitch me." He said to, like, because I was only on the online team, but he's like, "Pitch me pieces." And he was like, because I want these two, because he was like, "I'm going to be out of a job at the end of this year,
Right.
So I'm just so like, what are they going to do? Fire me?"
Whatever. Like, just let's try it.
Yeah. And then so I pitched that idea to him, and then like initially it was going to be this kind of fun, kind of like behind the scenes, behind the curtain DC piece of like the secret lives of autistic people in DC. And I thought that would be a fun piece. I might one day write something like that, but like,
I'd read it.
But then he kind of did what a good editor should do, is he pushed me. And he was like, why should this piece exist? And a mix of hubris and wanting to prove myself and insecurity, because hubris is often mixed with insecurity. I said, well, I think we've spent too much time trying trying to cure autism and not enough trying to help autistic people live fulfilling lives. He's like, okay, that's your piece, 10,000 words, go. My desk 2 months. And I was like, okay, I walked out and I was like, what did I just do? I'd never read 10,000 words of anything. But then, like, yeah, I was like, shit. But then we cut it down to like, then I turned it in, it was like 12,000 words.
And then it turned out you had a lot to say about it.
Then we cut it down to like 6,500 words. But then, like he said, this will be a great book one day. And so then that piece, and I initially thought, oh, maybe, but maybe not. Then that piece blew up overnight, completely changed my life. I was taking it came out my last day at National Journal before I went to go work for Roll Call. I was taking the bus and I was taking the nap on the bus. And then I opened up my phone and my friend Ron Fournier called me and he was just in tears thanking me for writing this piece because his son's autistic. And then he called me and the first thing he said was, holy shit. And then he was just like, thank you. And then, God, I sound like Trump when he says those big, strong guys with tears in their eyes saying, sir, thank you. But like, but then like, I opened my phone and I checked Twitter and like the whole thing just blew up and it completely threw my life for a loop. And then like I met my agent and she said, would you want to do a book on this? And I said, okay, sure. And I thought the next logical question is, okay, if we spend so much time, what if we stopped trying to cure autistic people? What does that mean? Like if we've focused so much on trying, like,
what does that look like?
What does that look like if I were to, like, what policy gaps do we have in America? And so I hit the road, and I went to Nashville, Tennessee. I went to West Virginia. I went to Michigan. I went to San Diego, though the things I reported out in San Diego just didn't work out. So I wasted a lot of time. I love, like, my employers were probably really happy when I'm not using anything in the San Diego trip. But I went to the Bay Area of California. I went to Pittsburgh. And I reported on things going on here in Washington and just basically tried to figure out what are the misconceptions we have about autism because we spend so much time even before like the 2000s and the focus, like before then it was seen as a version of childhood psychosis. It was seen as a version of schizophrenia. There were just so many bad perceptions or bad ideas floating around about autism that it led to so many policy gaps. And as a political journalist, and I decided to apply that same kind of rigor I would focusing on economic policy into autism policy. That's really what this book became. So
that's amazing. Hold on, we have some comments.
Yeah,
that's an amazing story. God, you have a cool job. Okay, Lisa. Hi, Lisa. My brother, who is a civilian high-level employee with the Navy, found this book and recommended it to me. I have an almost 20-year-old, unreliably verbal, and uses spelling to communicate. Haven't finished it, but love it so far.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh wow. And but I'm really happy that people in the Navy are reading it. Like I've often joked that like the Navy and the Air Force, like I know people who've been in different branches of the military who are autistic, but I've always joked that like the Navy and the Air Force are the most autistic branches.
Well, we had Cheyenne Thornton on, and they were in the Navy or Air Force or something, and was like, it was so not rigorous. What do you call it? Scheduled and like
regimented.
Yeah, regimented. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was really so it makes sense. And it's just like the ability, like especially if you're like an intelligence officer where like you're focused on like this one specific on counterterrorism and like the northern region of Pakistan. It lends itself to like a certain type of focus,
right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah, for sure. Like you can go down all of the rabbit holes, just like immerse yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It lends itself to that kind of thing.
Hey, Sylvia.
Hi, Sylvia.
Hello from Northern Ireland. Enjoying the interview. Fascinated. Would love to read the book. All of the books on the list are quite hard to come about here. Libraries are disgraceful. It's either buy a book or don't read.
Tough luck. I'm sorry, Sylvia. First off, my stepdad family is from the Republic of Ireland, but I should say I believe the term is Chuck-Iarla, and I hope for a 32 county Ireland one day. But either way, I hope that there can be peace in Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. But I think that, like I will work on that. I don't know the exact way we'll go about getting, or because like we do separate and individual deals with different countries, or with now I guess the UK, like we'll have to have a separate one for the European Union because because the United Kingdom decided to fuck off from the European Union. But we will be working on that. Sylvia, if you don't mind my asking, just so I can tell my stepdad, what county are you from in Ireland?
It'll show up in a minute. We have a
Okay,
little
cool.
bit of a delay.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, it is on. Oh, yes, it is on Audible, so you can get it on Audible. Yeah. So.
Oh, there's Cheyenne. It works for this. Yeah, the military.
Hi, Cheyenne. How are you?
For sure.
So yeah, like it is. But yes.
Arma.
So I will tell my stepdad. I will tell my stepdad about that. Thank you so much. My stepdad's family's from County Waterford. So, but yeah, so one of the biggest misconceptions is presuming incompetence versus competence. That is a big one. Yes. I think that is why a lot of some certain parent bloggers think they could write about their children in a very graphic way because they just assume that the kids will never understand or never be able to read it. But even if they never read something on the internet, they still deserve their privacy, because not because they may read it one day, but because they're human beings. And I believe that human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and deserve to be talked about with respect. And you wouldn't like it if, even if you never owned a computer, or you never looked online, you wouldn't like it if people were talking about you.
Potty or
yeah, like it would be really, it would still be really, it would be really dehumanizing. And I hope that the golden rule, which is treat others the way you want to be treated, and the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated. It matters. I'm interested in Cheyenne.
Okay.
AAS, the military. It provides structure. Yeah, exactly. It provides a lot of structure and support. Yeah, a few people I know got diagnosed after they left the service, and it doesn't surprise me.
Well, because after they leave, Cheyenne talked about this. There's like this fall off in support. Basically,
yeah, exactly.
You're just like, it's like you go from regimented to
civilian life,
right? It's
yeah,
like
exactly.
You lose all of that. Yeah. That's got to be hard.
Yeah. Then I'm interested in how families with autism work to support each other. It's really hard when multiple people are autistic. Has that happened in your family? So from what I understand, I'm pretty sure my mom is neurodivergent in some way, but she just never got the paperwork. But it's really interesting, because I think that there is that's good that you say support each other, because I think a lot of times it's not. There's just kind of like a way to commiserate, like people talk about commiserating, but like I think supporting each other is really hard. I think the best thing to do, I think this is why these kind of spaces are really good, because you get people who are kind of like-minded. I think another thing is, if you want, like, reach out to autistic people, autistic adults who have the ability and who have the capacity to. Like, I love talking with families of autistic people and families with plenty of autistic people. I definitely get that it can be difficult if there's multiple people who are autistic, because it's often leads to conflicting needs and conflicting interests, because autism is such a spectrum and the needs are so individualized. I think it really can be overwhelming. But I think being in spaces like this, or being able to go to places on the internet where, even if you're one of the few, because like autism is everywhere, but there are some spaces that are dedicated to it specifically, where you can find good people with good information. And places like this are great. Places like the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism are fantastic. Places like the Autism Women, the Non-Binary Network are fantastic. Places like We Are Like Your Child on Twitter, and Asking Autistic, the hashtag Asking Autistics are great.
In this group, I'm not sure who this was, but in this group, we have a group recommendations in our About section, and we have about 5 or 6 recommended groups that are autistic led that you can find support or advice.
Yes.
Things like that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I can. I don't know if that helped enough, but I think that could be. But I hope that gives you some. If I can't help you, I hope that these groups can help you.
And another thing about parent groups, right? Support groups. A lot of parent support groups go into that kind of commiserating with each other and stuff. And I would warn against that, right? Because really what you need is support in like how to find, how to access services, right? Yeah. So that's like a different type of group. So I'd be careful and watch the company you keep in those groups.
Yes, watch the company you keep, because it's very easy. You have to be really judicious. And once again, I think one of the really difficult things about autism as soon as you get the diagnosis is that a lot of times parents are wandering around in the dark, and like you go with the closest resource, the resource that's closest to you. Yeah. And I completely understand that. But once again, it requires, for your sake and for the sake of your kids, it requires you to be judicious, even if it means, just meeting with the group on the internet. So
there's actually in South Africa, there is a something network. I'm going to get back to you.
I know what you're talking about, and I forget the name of it.
Cheyenne, I know you know who this is. Tanya, something Autistic Network is down there that I would encourage you to reach out to.
Yeah, there's a good organization in Cape Town. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I forget it's on the top of my tongue, but I'll look into it. But yeah, we'll look into it. Thank you.
For sure. Okay, hold on. Let me get back to my questions. Let me see what else I was supposed to ask.
The Zikwande Foundation.
What is it?
It's either the Autistic Strategies Network or the Zikwande or the Zikwande Foundation.
Autistic I don't know. Strategies Network is what I was thinking.
I can't remember. I don't know anything about Zikwande, but if somebody's recommending it in this group, then I recommend you check them out. Cool. Yeah, lately it's been a little easier since most of those groups use person first language, which lets you know right away that they aren't listening to autistic people. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. That's usually a dead giveaway. Is look at the language that these groups use, because that can usually be a dead giveaway. Not to say that there's some autistic people that don't use person first. I know, I've talked with them, but for the most part, the majority prefer identity first language. So that's your tell, so to speak.
I'm showing these up here for people that come back and
cool.
Watch it later. A lot of people can't join in at the live, but they just come back and watch it whenever they can.
Cool. Yeah, it's to help for communication rights for non-speaking autistics. That's really cool. Yeah. I that sounds really cool. I would love to learn more about something like the Zikwande Foundation, see what other countries are doing different things for autistic people. Just because I'm generally interested to see what other people are doing.
So okay, let's talk about what do you hope is going to come out of this book? Because you talk about a lot of topics, right?
I talk a lot.
Gender, you go into race, you go into just all the intersectionalities. You go in. I mean, you talk a lot. You cover a lot.
Yeah, I cover a lot of ground, and
which I
wasn't able to cover every like. You should have seen the stuff that we left on the cutting room floor. There could be multiple books just from the stuff that we didn't include.
We'll look for the second in the series.
The sequel. The Eric Garcia literary universe. What I want more than anything is I want people to take the notion. Yeah, it's funny because I remember reading an interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates after he wrote The Case for Reparations, which was, for those who don't know, it was an article in The Atlantic arguing for reparations. And he didn't actually expect reparations to happen through that. He just wanted people to stop laughing at the idea because he felt like a lot of people just joked about it.
Didn't he have a book that just came out?
Yeah, The Water Dancer, which was a fiction novel, but then that came out like last year or a year before. It's really good.
Hold on. Is this who you're talking about?
Yeah, Between the World and Me, which is a great book. Yes. But yeah, that one came out in 2015. It's a great book. I recommend people read it. But like they interviewed him and like this interview with him, and he said, I just wanted people to stop laughing about the idea of reparations. And the same way, I just want people to stop taking it as absurd that the idea that autistic people should be at the center of every discussion about autism. I just want that. Like
rewind and say it again, Eric.
Yeah, like
I'm going to say that again.
I just want people to stop laughing at the idea, or almost get offended, because some people almost get offended. So let me just say it in like a clear and concise sentence. I want people to either stop, not get offended, or stop laughing at the idea that autistic people should be at the center of any discussion about autism, because look, there are plenty of policies that can improve autistic people's lives, like there are, and I write about them. You know, spending a lot of money on home and community-based services, ending some minimum wage labor, reducing the amount of times that you call the police on autistic people. There are things you could do, but the only way you could get to those points is if you listen to autistic people, and if you ensure that, and you include the gamut of autistic people, because I think a lot of people say, and I get this all the time, that it's easy for you to say because, and I'm sure you guys get this all the time, and it's like, it's kind of, but there's more in common with me than with your kid. Like, yes, I may be able to speak and hold a job, but like, I still have meltdowns. Like, there's a reason I'm wearing these headphones right now, just so like I can cancel out everything else. And like, I do get sensory overload, and I do get burnout real bad.
I mean, it takes you back to the whole thing about watching Mel Baggs, and you were like, gosh, I mean, I do speak, but I have so much in common with Mel. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember my mom saying, I think she could change the channel, because like she said, it reminded me of her when I was bullied growing up, and I understand that. But like, I couldn't if I wanted to, because I was just so like, oh my,
that's
like
me.
I was like,
right.
That's me. And it's like, yeah, there's differences, of course. I don't want to be glib about those differences, but in the same respect, it's like, wow, that was like the first time I saw myself, and the gaps aren't that big. And it's like, if I experience those things, I want for me tenfold for every other autistic person.
For sure. For
and
sure.
Depending on, and like, according to what your needs, I want all autistic people's needs met, no matter how big their needs are or how little their needs are. I just want their needs to be met, because like, I'm just generally not a fan of the idea that of high functioning and low functioning. And I read about that, because I think that high functioning, if you call someone high functioning, you're almost erasing the legitimate needs and impairments that they have. And it allows for schools to say, oh, well, we don't need to spend that much money on them, or we don't need to give them that much accommodations, because schools are strapped for cash. And they're like, because they're high functioning. Or conversely, and then there's a lot of time, like, I can't imagine, because like, I thought of myself as quote unquote high functioning for a long time. So it was a long time I felt like I didn't need a lot of services, but like, I kind of
didn't deserve them, right?
Yeah, I didn't deserve them. But, and then like, in the same respect, if you are called low functioning, that almost sets the bar criminally low. And it says, well, either it says, well, this person, we can never expect anything too much of them. Or the flip side is, well, because they're never going to have a fulfilling life that much, we don't need to spend that much money on them, or we can put them in an institution, or we shouldn't give them an organ transplant, or we shouldn't do X, Y, or Z. That rather than I think that some terms like high support needs or low support needs tend to be better, more, because like, at the end of the day, like, people say, like, for now, and again,
too,
and
because
language works and changes, but for now, it's the best thing that we have, because it tends to be more descriptive of what autistic people need instead of how people perceive them. And I think that's more important, is that, and eventually maybe the autistic community will find a better term. And I hope to God they find a better term. If there is a better term, then so be it. And I will, use that term,
Yeah.
So hopeful, if there is a better one, then by all means I'll use that. But
it goes
yeah.
back to that whole presuming competence thing. Lisa, you said, I think people in the community are really clear on the needs to pay it forward. Other parents have helped me with ideas, groups, therapists. I always want to try to help others. What I like about the book is the respect that Eric gives to non-speaking or unreliably speaking autistics. I have experienced other verbal autistics who also presume incompetence on the part of non-speakers. And it's so important to emphasize that. And I'm glad that you did.
Yeah. I want to say this, and I want to say it really importantly, that like, I used to presume incompetence. Even when I started writing about autism, like when I wrote the National Journal piece, I did presume incompetence. But you know what happened was that I met other autistic people who were unreliably speaking, or had limited verbal capacity or use
So
speech to
yeah.
communications, yeah, or anything. But even people who don't use speech to type, and I learned how they communicate, or like people who have limited communication capacity, and I learned to take their needs as legitimate. And as a journalist, that required some change on my part. So I don't want to come off as I'm perfect. Like I'm not to say that you were saying that, but like what I want to say is that it was a learning experience for me too, and I know I have a lot to learn, and I have places where I need to grow. And I think that that's what we also need is we also need, like you said, the ability to, you say non-speaking isn't black and white. I'm considered verbal and non-speaking. However, I can't speak for everyone who only uses AAC. That's a good point. There are some people who are mixed. And we should treat both as legitimate, and both and either or as legitimate. But like what I want to say is that so people now, for whatever reason, now can presume me as an expert. But even I still have things I need to learn and grow and change on, and I need to do those with an open heart and with an open mind, and I need to have that. And just like non-speaking autistic people were open in their hearts and minds to me with grace when I was wrong in the past, I need to be open-hearted when this community comes to me and new things change, and new people express things that I might have said or done that might be outdated. And I need to be when the autistic community communicates to me, I need to be open-hearted and I need to be open-minded enough to do that. So,
absolutely, all of this. Let's see. I'm missing. Oh, okay. Kristen said, this is our Australia friend. I love your quote in the recent Salon article. Autistic people should be at the table about anything that pertains to them. I think that is the simplest thing. And can I just speak to that really quickly?
Go ahead.
I am actually just starting. I'll be starting in September. Partners in Policy Making. Have you ever?
I've heard of it. Yes. Yeah. But for the people who don't, like, explain that.
Yeah. So each state has their own partners in policy making.
Yeah.
From what I can understand, I'm not an expert because I haven't even started yet. But so I applied to be in this partners in policy making, and basically you kind of learn how to navigate, like how to put a bill through, or like who to talk to for this, and like how to get in touch with this person or this senator or whatever. So I think it's important as I'm coming in as a parent, right?
Yeah.
There are other people who are disabled that are coming in as not self-advocates, but as identifying as themselves as disabled.
Yeah.
And for me to bring with me the question always, have we asked the people that this is going to affect, right?
Yeah.
Like so okay, if this is an autism policy, like have we asked the autistic people about this? Have we asked it? Yes. And I think that that's so important to ask all the time.
Yeah, it's funny how long we've spent so much time talking about autism while talking past autistic people. And that really has led to we still do it. And we don't have that good of results for that. We don't have much to show for it.
Spend a lot of money.
And even then we've wasted some money, but like, so like, but they should be, but we're now at, so you could make the argument, I don't know if I'd agree with it, but you can make the argument that, okay, in the 2000s, it was mostly parent-centered, and from like the 1970s to the 2000s, it was mostly parent-centered because we didn't presume that autistic people could communicate for themselves or speak for themselves. That was just not seen as an option. And then, of course, there were autistic people who were advocating for themselves, like Jim Sinclair and Donna Williams and Temple Grandin did, and all that. But those were a few people who were afforded very specific opportunities that allowed them to do that. But let's make that argument just now for argument's sake. Now you can't necessarily make that argument because now that after the 1980s and the 1990s, when that diagnostic criteria expanded and more people got diagnosed, and then after even non-speaking or limited speaking or whatever, people got services in schools thanks to the IDEA, and they were what was that? And it was by no means comprehensive, and they didn't get nearly everything, but it gave them a taste of it. And then now they've grown. That first generation has grown up, and now the second generation is coming up of people who benefited from it. You don't really have an excuse anymore to not include them.
And also with the birth of the social media, right?
Yeah, social media, because like a lot of the big argument that people say is that like, oh well, the my friend Sarah Gibbs, God bless her, like somebody says, people say that, oh, the only actually autistic people are who like object, who are like neurodiversity people are the ones on Twitter. It's like, yeah, well, Twitter, gave voice to a lot of people who otherwise, because it's a speech to text it's a text to speech platform, and it is a written form of communication, and it gives voice. I wouldn't have interviewed half the people who I interviewed on my book had it not been for them. So
For
like
sure.
we are including more people. So like I don't take that as a legitimate argument. It's like Twitter gave a platform that and gave people an avenue to communicate and their voices to be heard that they otherwise wouldn't have been heard. I'm not going to say that they didn't have a voice. They had a voice, it just couldn't be heard, but allowed for their voices to be heard. So like I don't buy that argument. And like even then, the most vocal voices on Twitter are so vocal because they've experienced very traumatic things.
That's right.
So it's funny because like, with the pandemic, I've been really kind of looking into our last big pandemic was the AIDS pandemic. And it was fast. You talk about partners in policy and things like that. It's like, it fascinates me how much those people who were those LGBTQ plus people who were dying of AIDS taught them. These guys were like street punks, like who taught themselves pharmacology, and these were people who were kids, who were like, some of them were poor, some of them were homeless, but they taught themselves because they demanded to be at the table, and God bless.
And they had to teach themselves because nobody else was doing it for them.
So, and God bless people like Anthony Fauci who listened to them, and they are now, and like I don't even know if I should have called them punks because I know that's a term that they use themselves, but I shouldn't have used it. But like, they, but like we have, but like in the same way, it's like they were seen as zealots back then, and then finally, but it was once they got heard that things changed, and we got to at least making it so that AIDS is something you can live with and not something you're going to die from. And in the same way, it's like now we should listen. We have autistic people at the gates, and we're doing the same thing, and we should be. And it's in the same way. Oddly enough, it's like a lot of autistic people. That's why you see a lot of autistic lawyers, because they taught that they had to learn the law, because the law is the main way that their lives are governed, and like that's why you see so many autistic lawyers, the people who work on Capitol Hill or people who work at advocacy groups, because like they had no other option but to learn the law and to learn policy, because ignorance literally meant death.
Right.
Means death still.
In the 80s, we got services in school, but they definitely weren't prioritized like they are now. If they just wanted to stop speech therapy for a student who has significant speech differences, they just stopped them and said, too bad.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a right until, it wasn't until 1990 and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that we had that special education was a right, and free, appropriate public education was encoded. And it was the first time, because the previous version of that bill, the Education for Handicapped Children Act, didn't include autism. So it required autism being improved, and it would probably, like as to Kimberly's point, it took it being specifically encoded in the law, so that it was no longer just like, this is a nice thing to do. This is like something you have to do legally.
You have to do it, right? Right.
And even then,
my mom started like an inclusive daycares where I grew up, and it was like the early 80s, mid 80s. And she was like, at that point, these kids weren't even being served by the schools. They were being served by the health department.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't even getting any kind of anything.
They were treated as patients. They weren't treated as human beings.
Yeah.
And that's really fascinating. Like the fact that it was handled by the health department and not the education department. But that is, once again, it's further indicative of where things were at the time and how much things changed. And we should add that like it still isn't where it even, because of course the letter of the law is very different from the law in action, because the federal government is supposed to fund like what, 40%?
I don't understand. I don't understand that whole thing, like of how they say, like IDEA says they have to do this.
They have to spend 40%.
Then why? Like, I don't understand how they cannot fully fund that.
Then they only spend like something like 14.67%.
But how is that legal? Like, I don't even.
I don't know. Like there have been lawsuits. There should be more, but like from what I understand, it's, you know, the most recent version of IDEA, it's either on the cliff or it's either lapsed or it's on the verge of lapsing or something like that because they need to reauthorize it or something. I forget. I don't quote me on this, but like I know that it's always running short on money, and they never fully funded it. And what's interesting is that, like, it's funny because like this during the last Democratic primary, and I read about this in the book. Nearly every candidate, every Democratic candidate, primary candidate, with the exception of Joe Biden, which he didn't do until he became the nominee, all pledged to fully fund IDEA, or they pledged to increase the funding for IDEA. But I was just like, how bad? Like on one end, good that like it was like a victory for disabled people that like that was encoded in policy platforms. But on the other end, how grim is it that has to be a campaign pledge? You know,
because it was already supposed to be done.
It was 30 years ago.
It's not funny. I'm laughing anyway.
Yeah, I'm laughing because what are you going to do? Cry otherwise? Right. So
it's not funny, but it's like,
it's like, how is that a campaign pledge?
Right.
When that should be the floor. Like, so for example, you know, like Bernie Sanders' campaign pledge was not just to fully fund IDEA, but raise the funding to 50%. The federal government funding it for 50%.
Right.
So that was but like the 40% should be the floor. You know, that should be just a given.
All right. So, okay, I can't hold you forever today. So I have to ask this final question. I really appreciate everybody's questions, but it's like, we'll talk forever.
We'll talk forever. And if you want, DM me on Twitter. I'm at Eric M. Garcia. You know, but
all of your links are in the comment section.
Yeah, exactly. So DM me or email me or whatever. But
I have to ask you my final question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my final question to everybody, and everybody has a different answer, so no pressure. If you could give one piece of advice to the parents of a newly diagnosed autistic child, what would it be?
I'd say that recognize that your kid, after the diagnosis, is the same kid you got when you learned you were pregnant, or when you learned you were going to bring the kid home from the adoption agency or whatever. That's still the same kid. And when you found out you were going to be a parent, you basically made a promise that you would do anything for that kid, right? Exactly. So doing anything for your kid still stands, but it's just going to look a little different. And that's okay. But that your kid is still, even as your kid's autistic, that's still the same kid you wanted when you found out you were going to be a parent, when you chose to be a parent. Because being a parent is a choice every day. There are some people who don't make that choice on some days. But you need to recognize that your kid is fine just the way that they are. And that you need to fight to make things better for them. And that when they have impairments and when they have difficulties, you have to fight. You should fight to work to make sure that they have those things ameliorated, because you don't want them to suffer. But in the same way, you should want to change the world so that, the best advice the way that I heard it best was from a guy by the name of Kayvon Stassen, who's a professor at Vanderbilt University. He's the father of an autistic son, which is, he said, I wouldn't change my son for the world, so I'll change the world for my son.
I love that.
And that is, that's powerful. And it's like, well, that's always your kid, whether your kid's autistic or not, that doesn't change it. And you have to be fully prepared that when you learn that, you are getting ready to advocate for your kid and give everything, make sure that you have everything in the world for your kid, and that the world is more accepting of your kid. And you need to recognize that your kid is fine as they are, and you have to love them just as much. And the way that you love them is going to be different. And the way that they love you, because I think there's a lot of parents who lament like, oh, my kid never says that they love me, things like that. You'll find a way. Like, I know people who like, they figured out how their kid says I love you, even if it's not without those same words. I have a lot of friends from a lot of different countries, and I've learned to say hello and goodbye or small things in different languages. And it still says, when I say to a French friend of mine, or to a friend of mine who speaks Spanish, te amo. I'm still saying I love you, but it's just a different way. When I call my Arabic friends my habibis, my beloveds, the people who I love, my sweethearts, I just call them habibi, but it means the same thing. In the same way, you'll find the way that your kid shows that they love you. And you are going to show, the way you love your kids is going to be different, but it's not going to be any less. And that your relationship and your dynamic doesn't have to be any less, but it's just going to be very, very different. And part of it is that your kid needs you, just maybe not the way you think they might. So that's all I would say. There are many ways to say I love you by Mr. Rogers, of course. And that goes to this point. Like, I started out from this. Maybe I'm a little like, I grew up in a very, very religious household. My mom is a very, very devout Christian, and my grandmother, God rest her soul, is. And they started from that baseline of that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and whether you're a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jew, whatever, or non-believer. Isn't that a great way to start, just from the baseline that you're great just the way you are?
Yes.
Isn't that like, that's whether you're religious or whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, just believing that people have value just because they exist.
Just because you're here. Just
because you're here in and of itself is a marvel of humanity. And just starting from that baseline of, okay, this is what you have, this is what we do, so what are we going to do about it? I think that's great. So that's how you start.
Comments to that. Everybody loves that.
Thank you. So yeah, that's all I would say to any parent. And then, of course, the other thing I would say is the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So probably check back, and you wouldn't be surprised if you found some neurodivergent people in your family.
That. Oh my gosh. Okay, you all are wonderful.
This has been wonderful. This has been great.
These my book clubbers are so wonderful. I love having y'all here. Y'all are the best conversationalists.
Y'all are the best.
And thank you from every corner of the world. And yes, especially to Kristen, who is over there at 4 a.m.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. Thank you. We were just talking about this before we started. I want to go to Australia. I know that you were at one of my other events. I want to go to Australia right now. I know that things have gone to shit in Australia right now, but I want to go to Australia and visit you and everything. So everybody, please get vaccinated so we can all go see each other. So.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so I'm gonna get off of the broadcast, but you stay with me, Eric. Okay,
cool.
Oh, and we're gonna do a giveaway. I'm gonna do a giveaway because I promised them we're gonna do a giveaway of a signed copy of the book, but I can't do it while I'm online because it's like hard to do all of that. So if you commented today, I'm gonna do another live and pick a number out of the thing. We're gonna do that today. Okay, so I will choose your name and a little bit later today. So thank you for sending that over, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Talk to y'all later.
Thank you.